Good morning, everyone. We are up to Perikid Aleph, Mishna Aleph, chapter 11, Mishna 1. Ein Neisland develo ugroigreis v'seich hamurias. We may not put in pressed figs or dried figs into murias. Neishu ma'abdan, because by doing so he destroys them. Avonai says hayayin lemurias, but you could put wine into murias. Now, we are talking about murias. We're going to explain soon what that is. It was a common practice to add either devela, which means pressed figs or dried figs, into murias. And in our case, the figs are added to the murias are truma. So what is murias? So I'm going to read to you from the Yad Avram how they explain murias. Murias was an oily condiment produced from the fatty innards of fish. The innards would be steeped in a mixture of salt and water, which would act to draw out the oil from them. When the salt solution was fully permeated with oil, the innards would be placed in a fresh mixture, which would again extract oil from them, producing a second batch of murias. This process would be repeated until the innards were drained of oil. So that's murias, this kind of oily a mixture from salt of salt water and fish oil. Now, it was common to add dried or pressed figs to murias. The figs would be soaked in the oily mixture for some time, after which they would typically be removed. The juice would be squeezed out and they would be discarded. For some reason, it added some kind of, flavor to it, or whatever it may be. Did something to it. So we're saying like this. So actually, what you would do it sounds more like, let me read it again. The figs would be soaked in the oily mixture for some time, after which they would typically be removed. Their juice would be squeezed out, and they would be discarded. For some reason, it was something tasty for the figs to be soaked in the murias, to be able to absorb the murias, squeeze out the juice that had murias mixed with it, and then discard the figs. So that's the problem. The problem is discarding the figs. They're truma. So instead of landing up eating them, you're just taking out the juice and discarding them. That you may not do the truma. Therefore, the Mishnah says you cannot add or put these figs into the murias, because at the end of the day, you're going to be discarding the figs, which is not treating the truma properly. Truma is meant to be eaten. Do something to it that won't allow it to be eaten is considered ruining it. But the Mishnah says, though, aval naisenas hayayin lemurias, but to add wine to the murias, that you may do. So the Yad Avram explains, the murias produced after the first two steepings in salt water, after the first two, this is the third one, had a low fat content and needed the addition of wine to increase its potency. That's what it did. Since the wine is used to enhance the flavor of the murias and is consumed as part of the mixture, this is considered a normal use of wine and is permitted even with truma. So basically, you're using it in a normal way, you're consuming it, and therefore it is no problem. Now, the Ratanur brings down, there is an opinion that says that the purpose of the wine in this kind of low, as I described it as a low-grade murias, was really to take away the bad smell. And according to that opinion, using wine of truma for this purpose is tantamount to destroying it and is prohibited. To add wine to it, where basically the whole point is not to enhance it in any way other than to remove the bad smell, even though you're going to be consuming it, that's like destroying it. That's misusing it. And therefore, our Mishnah is coming to say, no, that's not what the wine into the murias is for. Wine to the murias, it goes in there to make it more potent, to give a positive effect to it, and it's consumed to give an actual positive effect to it, to its consumption, and it's also consumed. Therefore, it's not a problem. Were it only to be used to remove the foul odor, then that means you didn't use it as food, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to use it. Our Mishnah is saying no, that's not how That's not why the wine is being used for the Morius. Next case, v'mefat minas hashemen, and you cannot, they translate it as perfume the oil. V'leisin es hayani animulim, but you can make wine into animulin. Okay, so I'll explain. Let me again read to you here the procedure. This refers to the procedure of soaking aromatic plant roots and spices in olive oil in order to make it fragrant. Okay. Since the spices are not consumed but are removed from the oil and discarded, the absorbed oil goes to waste. Mishna therefore forbids doing this with oil of truma. So in the first case, the wine was truma, the figs were truma, and in this case, the oil is truma. You want to make it more aromatic by adding these spices. And that's what the spices do. The spices are chulin. There's not an issue using the spices for that. The problem is that the spices absorb the oil. And once they absorb the oil, and you don't do it, and afterwards the spices are discarded. So the oil of truma that became absorbed into these aromatic spices is going to get ruined, and therefore you can't do that. That's one explanation to what's happening here when you add the aromatic spices. Another explanation, which is what the bartender brings down also, is Mishna is referring to perfuming, meaning adding this aroma that converts the olive oil into a medicinal ointment that is inedible. This is considered an improper use of edible truma. So again, you have the oil that's edible. By now adding these aromatic spices, it's not edible anymore, even though it may have some other purpose. But the point is that you cannot ruin it from being edible. Now, the Yad Avram adds a very interesting point here. Okay, you made it into the point is, according to this explanation, you made it into a medicine and it's inedible. Okay, as a medicine, what are you going to do with it? You're gonna smear it on yourself. You're gonna smear it. It's going to be an ointment. So although anointment is a legitimate use of truma oil, okay, if you have truma oil and you want to use it to smear on your skin, you can do that. Though it must always remain in an edible state. Processing it into an edible ointment is forbidden based on the law taught in Mishnah 3 that one may not alter truma food from their natural state. The point being made here is that according to the second explanation, where by adding these aromatic spices, the issue is not absorbing. The issue is that you now render the oil inedible. So the question is, okay, but we know that taking truma oil and smearing yourself with it, it's a permissible use. So what's the problem now? The answer is, even then, when you use it for anointing, it's edible. You cannot change it from its edible state. In our case, that's what you're doing, and therefore you can't do that. Then the Mishnah says, but you can make the wine into animulin. Animulin was a drink produced by adding honey and pepper to wine. This beverage was also known, the condiments are consumed with the wine so that none of it goes to waste. According to this, may be done even with the wine of truma. Okay, so basically, you are adding these aromatic spices to the wine, meaning you're adding the honey and the pepper to the wine. Even if these were to be truma, it wouldn't be a problem because these additions, these spices added to the wine, are consumed with the wine. Nothing goes to waste, and so therefore, unlike the case by the oil, where the oil was truma and the spices absorbed from the oil, and then you get rid of the spices, which means you're getting rid of the oil that was absorbed. Here, by the wine, even though the honey and the pepper may absorb the wine, it's all consumed, and therefore there's no problem. Next, ein mevashlin yayin shel truma. One may not cook truma wine, because you reduce it. What does that mean? Two explanations Bartanura says. Some say it means that actually, by cooking it, so you basically boil off some of the wine. And that would be considered, that evaporating wine is lost wine. And therefore, that's like destroying truma, and therefore you can't do that. That's one explanation. If you cook the wine, there's a certain amount that gets lost due to evaporation, and that's called ruining it. That's called, that wine that evaporates is ruined, it's destroyed, it's considered destroyed. Another explanation that's given, Bartuna brings down, is that the issue is when it says you reduce it, it means it's not so much the evaporation that's the problem, but rather you reduce the number of people who want to drink it. In times of the Mishnah, most people didn't want to drink cooked wine. So now by cooking the wine, you're reducing those who wouldn't drink it rather. And even though you personally would drink it, the fact that you make it undrinkable you make it undrinkable to a significant amount of people would already fall into a rabbinic concern that at the end of the day, ultimately it might go to waste. If this is something that everybody drinks, okay. But since it's not what everybody drinks, and a significant amount of people don't drink it, so allowing one to cook wine could lead into a situation where the wine is going to get wasted. So even though you personally would go ahead and drink the wine, the Mishna says you still can't do it because this is something that it becomes, if you cook the wine, it becomes now to a significant amount of people, they don't want it anymore. And therefore, if people start cooking wine, it could lead to the wasting of wine. Therefore, we say, the Tanakama says you can't cook the wine of Truma because by doing so, you are reducing it. Either means you're reducing it by evaporation, or you're reducing it means you're reducing the amount of people, you're significantly reducing the amount of people that would want to drink it. Yehuda Mater, the Mishnah says the opinion of Yehuda is that it's permissible, because Yehuda says no. By cooking it, you improve it. What does it mean you improve it? So Ratanur explains, Yehuda says you improve it because it lasts longer. Cooked wine doesn't sour as quick as uncooked wine. And therefore, Yehuda says that cooking wine is permissible because I'm not ruining it. I'm actually improving it because I'm making it last longer. So that's the question between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. What will define for us whether I am improving the wine or not improving the wine? Yehuda says if it can last longer, that's called improving the wine, and that's enough to be considered that I am not that I'm not ruining the truma. According to the Tanakama, at the end of the day, it may last longer, but you've either lost some of it to evaporation, or so many people aren't going to want to drink it anymore. And that is the greater factor, and therefore it's considered by doing so that you are ruining the truma, and therefore that you may not do. Prohibition against someone who, while harvesting or bundling together the cut grain, that he should not collect. He may not collect the ears that fall, but rather you leave it to the poor. So, in the process of either harvesting or bundling, there are these ears that are going to basically fall away while you're doing it. So those ears that fall away, you are prohibited from collecting them. Shinamar, as it states, and the gleanings of your gatherings you shall not gather. But the rule is that this only applies if the amount of ears that fell were one or two at a time. But if three at a time fell, all three belong to the owner of the field. So that's a important detail when it comes to the mitzvah of leket, of allowing the aniyim to have the gleanings. Okay, now we have mitzvahs leisase, a prohibition. Shlo yivtzer oilos hakerem, not to gather the oilos of the vineyard, which something we mentioned yesterday. El yanichem laniyim, but rather leave it to the poor. Shnei the pasuk states, you shall not glean from your vineyard the oilos. Ezehu oilos. What are oilos? So eshkol katan she'ena me'uva ke'eshkol. It means a small bunch of grapes that's not thick like a regular bunch of grapes. She'en le kasef. It has no shoulder, which we explained that to mean yesterday. There's no arm connecting the twigs to the trunk. And the grapes are not overhanging one another, but scattered along the branch. This applies in a vineyard, only in a vineyard alone. Have a wonderful day, wonderful Shabbos, wonderful Yontif, all the best.